Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Finance Feeds podcasts. My name is Nikolai Isaev. I'm editor in chief of Finance Feeds. Joining me today on episode 20 is Ingmar Mattus, who is co founder at Tickmill Group and also founder at Andromeda Capital Partners. Ingmar, welcome. Thanks for joining our podcast.
Hi, Nikolai, and hi to all listeners. Thank you for having me. It's a really pleasure, and I've listened to your previous podcast as well, and I think you're doing a great job there.
Thanks so much for the kind words. Ingmar, I wanted to jump right in. There's some exciting news coming from Tickmill. You have just announced that Tickmill has secured a DFSA license in the UAE and is opening up an office in Dubai. Can you tell us more about your plans for the MENA regions going forward? And UAE, to me, is shaping up to be another strong regional financial center.
Yes, indeed. I mean, so Dubai for us, I'm not sure if you know, Dubai for us is actually the sixth licensed. So we have UK, Cyprus, Seychelles, Malaysia, South Africa, and Dubai is now the sixth license that we have. And to be honest, we've been looking at Dubai for some years already. And I mean, we have some existing business in the MENA region, mostly through the UK entity of ours, and it's not only with Tickmill, I would say, but it's also across the board. Whether you're talking about CFD industry or futures industry or equity trading, so MENA region is by far one of the fastest growing regions in the brokerage space, and even outside of brokerage space. So if you're talking about like VC funds, asset management, real estate investments, and so forth, so Dubai and the surrounding areas are very interesting and very fast growing countries. And for us, yeah, it was kind of logical step.
Since obviously have secured the license, what's your opinion on the regulatory landscape there in Dubai as compared to other jurisdictions? Like you said, this is your sixth license. You have lots of experience in other regions as well.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I could probably write a book about getting licensed, staying in compliance with all the rules and regulations, and to be honest, sometimes I wish I would just run some sort of flower shop or something. That it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You close the shop. You go home, watch some football or do something else. But yeah, I've been in this business 20 years now, so it is what it is. So, in terms of your question, then the world has actually changed a lot in the last couple of years, and I think it's probably some sort of political decision that the folks in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and in the surrounding countries have done in the past couple of years, in the sense that they are extremely friendly to new business. It has to be considered, of course, with the fact that while they're of course very friendly, then they do a proper due diligence, and as long as you have a clean regulatory track record, then you are more than welcome to launch an office there and start your business. So yeah, regulatory environment has changed a lot, and I think it's a fact of life in our space that you can count on not only, like oftentimes people say that in life you can count on two things, which is death and taxes,
Hmm.
but in our space you can count on three things, which is death, taxes, and the constant regulatory changes.
Uh-huh.
So it's part of the DNA, I think, when you're in the financial industry.
Hmm.
But outside of Dubai, so I was actually expecting some sort of, let's say, loosening up of maybe regulations in UK as well. To be perfectly honest with you, and especially because of this Brexit that took place. And I'm not a UK citizen, so obviously I didn't vote in the referendum, but I was actually in favor of the referendum because it's too extensive. I mean, sometimes, when you look at these new regulations that come out of Brussels, and I was hoping that UK might become flexible. And so, yeah, we'll see. But Dubai, countries around Dubai, very interesting. Every time I go, to some conference in recent years, or have some meetings, people are very positively minded about to buy, and not only to buy, also the countries around Dubai
Hmm.
and the UAE. So.
Great. Well, speaking a little bit further about regulations, and you had just mentioned, your expectations for the UK. Last year, when you and I spoke at the Finance Magnates London Summit, you told me you expect the retail FX industry to consolidate further, particularly with smaller shops in Europe not being able to sustain the strict regulatory requirements. This was at the time when we saw a lot of market volatility in FX, right, due to interest rates and other different factors. I wanted to ask, has your outlook changed since November last year when we spoke about this?
To be honest, it has not, to be honest, I've had this view for some years already, and it's nothing unique. I think everyone who's been in this industry for as long as myself or longer, they understand that, as I was saying, that regulations become stricter and stricter, and it takes more and more investments to first of all launch a business in this industry, and secondly to remain operational in this industry. And because compliance function takes more and more, investments, and it's not only compliance, it's not only regulations, but it's HR costs, so IT expenses, and so forth. Let's face it. So the industry where we are, it's much more sophisticated than it was 10 or 20 years ago.
Hmm.
So it's something that we really have to accept, that the consolidation is an ongoing part of the industry, and there's no stopping. And if you look, for example, the business practices of metacodes as well. So it is much more difficult today to get a white label, if at all, from metacodes.
Hmm.
And the offshore jurisdictions are tightening up. So there are some activities, I think, in St. Vincent or Vanuatu that took place recently. So we are out of the offshore jurisdictions. We're regulated in Seychelles, which in my book is one of the best offshore regulators.
Hmm.
And even they are constantly monitoring as to what are the regulators in Europe and other solid, let's say, jurisdictions doing, and then trying to kind of enforce similar rules, which is something we really welcome, because it really takes one bad apple to destroy the whole reputation of the industry in a particular country or a region. Regulation is, while you might think that I'm complaining
Hmm.
here a little bit about tougher regulations, then in fact it's a necessary part of building a prosperous, sustainable future for the whole industry. And moreover, I think clients really expect that, even if you're operating under some offshore jurisdiction, then you are still making sure that clients can withdraw their funds at the end of the day if they so wish.
I wanted to ask about multi-asset trading, another big topic we've discussed for really a couple of years now. But I wanted to focus specifically on futures and options trading because Tickmill expanded its product set with futures for institutional and retail customers last year, right? I wanted to ask, has there been meaningful upside in demand for futures trading at Tickmill since last year, kind of given the current market dynamics? And also, I wanted to ask, the popularity of options trading is really exploding in the United States, and I would argue in Europe, in some parts of Europe as well. Are you seeing this materialize with more traders using or trading options contracts at Tickmill?
The answer is yes, and it's a constant development. So the exchanges, not only in the US but also in Europe, such as Eurex, for example, in Germany. So they are constantly rolling out smaller and smaller contracts, which are more understandable, more comfortable to retail traders. And the real beauty with exchange traded products is that because they are exchange traded, so there is a regulated venue where the products are traded, then the regulators and also the clients feel simply more comfortable. When the trading with these instruments take place, there's more transparency, like I was saying, and obviously the trend definitely is towards exchange traded products. So not only towards futures and options, but also equities and equity options.
Hmm.
And we took this course a couple of years ago, and as I've been saying to you a couple of times in the past, and we have a view that we are not going to make any money when it comes to futures and options trading for at least minimum 5 years.
Mm.
So we're building up a business, client base, presence in this space, and then hopefully, with some certain, we'll start generating some profits there as well. And the reason being is that on the exchange traded product side, there are no market making revenues. So the only thing that you earn when clients trade with you is the commission. So you get the commission revenues, and because it's highly competitive market, and the commissions generally have to be quite tiny, and hence you need significant volumes to cover first your expenses, and then maybe have something you can buy bread as well from the grocery shop,
Uh-huh.
grocery
Yep.
store.
Well, that was actually going to be this segues into my next question because I see that Tickmill puts a lot of emphasis on price transparency in futures trading, and I think not just price transparency, but also maybe commission transparency. On your website, you state transparency is paramount. Can we talk a little bit more about this philosophy? I think you just mentioned a part of it, and why this makes Tickmill stand out from the rest of the pack, so to say.
So, I mean, I think the primary thing what we mean by transparency when trading the futures and options markets is that the orders are sent to a regulated venue, and the execution also takes place on a regulated venue, so an exchange, and it's different. In that sense, that on the OTC market, yes, we all have, let's say, currency pairs such as euro against the dollar, but the price there, the bid ask price, really differs across brokers. And when it comes to exchanges, then whatever price is there on the exchange, every one of our clients and the clients of other brokers see the same price. So you actually understand, see what you are trading, and all the other people across the world see the same prices
Mm-hmm.
that you. So it's, I think, extremely beneficial to clients. And I've been personally trading futures options for the last 20 years. And even though I built with a team, Tickmill, and we are a very successful firm and so forth in the FX and CFD space, then my heart has always kind of been on the exchange traded product side. But it was just so much easier to launch a FX CFD broker than a futures broker. And now when we built presence on the CFD FX side, then we can also do the same on the futures side, and that's exactly what we are doing.
Hmm. Great. Awesome. During our last conversation in London, you and I also touched upon crypto regulations. And, fast forward 5, 6 months, today we see what I would call regulation by enforcement, or maybe whack a mole type of regulatory function right now in the US, right? And at the same time, when we look to Europe, we see the EU Parliament just voted to adopt MiCA, right? The sort of regulatory framework for crypto going forward. I wanted to ask, we spoke about forex regulation. What's your take, or what's your outlook on crypto regulation with some of these developments? And if you have a particular opinion on MiCA, I keep asking a lot of my interviewees, do you think that MiCA can and maybe should actually act as a roadmap for the United States going forward? Because it seems like Europe is a step ahead in terms of at least building out a framework.
Yeah, it's a question that we can spend hours on this topic and discussing it. So I think a lot in life depends not on the actual regulations, but on the facilitators of the business. And what I mean by this is that we could have or we can have the best possible regulation for cryptos in Europe, but if the facilitators, such as banks, for example, if they are not very supportive of the whole industry, then there is no use of regulation. And it's an extremely complex topic. And I've met with so in the US the largest player there is Coinbase, and I've met with Coinbase people, and of course it's extremely frustrating when you are not getting answers from your regulators as to what you can or cannot do, or what are their views as to particular products. But I think this has always been the case with innovation. So innovation is always ahead of regulation, and regulators by nature they take time to analyze things and then come up with solutions. So probably if I had a crystal ball, then even the crystal ball would not know what the future will be like in Europe and the US when it comes to cryptos, because there are so many opinions, there are so many risks associated with it. It's difficult to predict what will happen. So at the same time, I believe that cryptos in one way or the other will remain. Whether one can build a big business out of it is, of course, another question. And I've traded cryptos myself as well, so in the past. But my view as to this was that I traded only because there was this massive hype and because there was momentum. Then I just bought and eventually sold. But it's a very difficult landscape, and I know many crypto firms are trying to kind of solidify their business models by launching products that we already offer, such as futures options, FX, and CFDs. I know some firms who are still not so letting go, and they are still trying to push cryptos forward as a one single product line. So at the end of the day, some people will be right, some people will be wrong. But like I said, even if I had a crystal ball, then even the crystal ball would not be able to tell what does the future hold for us.
Hmm.
If you ask me like personally, so like if I am like a huge believer in cryptos, then I'm not a huge believer when it comes to value preservation or investments, because I think the currencies that we have available, the reserve currencies across the world, and others, they are able to facilitate the needs that ordinary people have, and companies, and so forth. So and I was just reading last week an article about one businessman who bought Ethereum at a very early stage, and he was saying that Ethereum today is worth like 200 million or something. But the only problem is that
Oh,
he lost the keys,
uh huh.
and I was just thinking, so imagine that you lose the number of your bank account, and you go to the bank, and the bank asks, yes, you can access your money, but you need to give me the 20-digit bank account number or something. And if you don't know exactly the number, then I won't give you the money. So I mean, so this is not, I think, what we expect for, and I think because of the volatility as well. So first of all, you lose a password, then the coins are gone. Then the volatility, which is quite constant in these markets. Then you have the banks working against these initiatives. You have the regulators. So it's a tricky market, and at the end of the day, probably the people who are very bold and have high conviction, some of these people will make a lot of money, but most people will just lose a lot of money. And I think that's the case also with retail clients. So have in mind that most retail clients really bought cryptos at the very end, and which means that most of them have lost a ton of money.
Hmm.
So you can't really argue that the cryptos are a tool to preserve capital, or even gain some proceeds out of it.
Hmm. It's interesting that you mentioned Coinbase because I've spoken to other interviewees about Coinbase. Some people who actually know, I think, some of their executives personally, and it seems like a lot of people are sympathetic to Coinbase right now because of the apparent frustrations that they have with some of the regulators in the U.S. As you may know, they have essentially filed some legal documents in a court, I think here in New York, to basically ask the regulators, well, nicely, to basically ask the regulators to start basically giving a framework of their own here in the United States with respect to how they classify certain assets and certain transactions, right? That Coinbase participates in, or is one of the firms that Coinbase participates in. And it's certainly an interesting situation to see what unfolds or what transpires in the near future. If I can go back a little bit and let's say present a hypothetical, right? Let's say the Mika framework that has been developed is put into use. Obviously, not right now. It's going to take quite a bit of time to do that. Individual institutions and individual regulatory bodies in the EU, both on the government level and on the regulatory level, have to essentially enact policies, laws, and things like that. But let's say that does happen, and that does happen faster than any kind of similar work is being done in the US. Do you think that we will experience a possible sort of brain drain of talent, let's say moving from the United States to Europe, moving from working, for U.S. Companies and going to work in the EU, and perhaps a certain amount of capital flight, maybe on the VC side or on the investment side, in terms of companies who are investing in all kinds of crypto and blockchain firms. I mean, I don't think we should forget that part of this is there's crypto, there's these assets that are being traded as part of speculation, but there's the second part, which is blockchain being a utility, right? And so many different companies building out many different things to solve a lot of the world's, so to say, problems on the blockchain using DLT, and also obviously incorporating a lot of Web3 now, which is a big topic. I know I threw a lot out there, Ingmar, if you want to try to
Yeah,
tackle these.
it's highly unlikely that even this new regulation would bring massive growth to Europe when it comes to cryptos or the whole blockchain. So, because like I was saying before, then at the end of the day, the banks are really hesitant towards this space, and the different regulators of let's say different European Union countries can also have their own views as to this. So, as an example, so I'm originally from Estonia, currently living in Switzerland. So I can give you two examples. So one from Switzerland and one from Estonia. Out of Estonia, originally there were thousands of crypto-related firms in Estonia, because there was a very peculiar registrations that crypto firms could apply for and kind of get regulated. And there was a new round of approval processes taking place in Estonia just recently, and out of the thousands, if I'm not mistaken, 10 or 20 so were able to keep the regulation in place. All others, they were forced out. And from Switzerland, so I live close to the city of Zug, which is called kind of the crypto valley in
Hmm.
Switzerland. Nobody likes these firms, to be honest, because they register office, they register companies. Yeah, they go all over the world saying that they are Swiss companies, yet none of the people actually live in Switzerland. So they have a tendency to take advantage of the reputation that Switzerland has, but at the same time operate not in the best possible way. So but at the same time, there is, of course, a likelihood that this new regulation, just because there is a regulation, might bring new investments to Europe as well, and possibly, hopefully, some countries will take advantage of it and promote these services and products. Because I mean, at the end of the day, we live in an open world. So if a door is shut in the US, uh, then business will just go elsewhere. And as to Coinbase, then I understand that they're looking into UAE now, and I know Binance was. I think Binance had one of the first licenses out of UAE, if I'm not mistaken, and FTX was there, and so forth. I mean, at the end of the day, countries and regulators themselves as well have to be concerned that their jurisdictions are open for business and go hand in hand with innovation. So you can't always kill or just strangle innovation. So rather try to nurture it, and of course you can put some barriers in place, but nature always finds a way. That's what they say.
Hmm. Great, awesome. So the last time we saw each other was actually in March of this year. It was in Florida, but we saw each other briefly. I think it was like for 2 minutes, and but in those 2 minutes, you and I discussed the situation with Credit Suisse at the time. It was playing out like literally in real time when we met. Fast forward to today, we have another U.S. bank that's failed, First Republic. There is now talk of another bank, possible bank failure out west here in the United States, PacWest Bank. Not sure if it's still solvent. I wanted to get your take on the current situation with banks in the U.S. and Europe. I think you probably follow this topic. Do you think we risk sort of further contagion in the coming months? And also wanted to ask you about sort of banks' relationships with crypto firms, because it looks to me like there's only a handful of banks that are, considering what's going on, there's only a handful of banks right now that are working with crypto players. Do you think we should be worried about concentration risk going forward in terms of, you know, banking institutions servicing crypto companies?
It's a long question again. So, but just going back to this meet we had in Boca, then this 2 minutes was worth it. So it's always good to see you. And so in terms of banks, then I'm not sure. I think you know that. So I've had a conviction trade on banks for some time already, and so I. What it means is that I took pretty much 10 different banks, bought shares in these 10 different banks. And when doing that, I was sure that one or two of these banks would fail. And of course, I had shares in Credit Suisse as well. And if you would have asked me, 2 years ago, then obviously there were problems and so forth. But I would have never expected that something like this would happen to a bank out of Switzerland. So, but I still have room for one more bank in my portfolio to fail. At the moment, I don't have any significant positions in U.S. banks, but it's one of these interesting situations now where I believe that the European banks are in fact in a better shape because. I believe the regulators on the European side were maybe more up to the standards when they were regulating this sector during the last 10 years or so. So I don't see any concerns when it comes to European banks, but I don't think we are yet out of the woods when it comes to US banks because the trust element has clearly been hit there. And I remember when I started in the banking sector, my career, then what I was told on the first days, banks really sell one thing, and that one thing is trust. So when the trust is gone, then it's almost impossible to bring it back. So it takes years, decades to build trust, but it can be taken away in a day or two. And when it comes to US, let's say mid-sized banks, then they are definitely in a very fragile situation because I think the general population as well have very, let's say, high emotions now. So people can behave very irrationally. So pull maybe deposits from a perfectly fine bank, and so I would think that the bulk of the problems are still ahead of us, not behind us,
Hmm.
because it's a function also of, let's say, the interest rates. So the problems with these banks were primarily because during the low interest rate period they accumulated government papers with low interest rates just to earn at least something. But these treasuries have now fallen, so because they have to reflect the underlying interest rate on the market, and hence there is a unrealized loss that these guys are sitting on, and obviously if clients are pulling deposits as well, then it creates even bigger problems for them. What was really interesting for me was Schwab, for example, one of the largest brokerage firms in the US, who did the same thing pretty much. So they just bought treasuries and during this low interest rate period, and now are also facing some issues there. I think this is what happens when you have 10 years low interest rates, and then suddenly interest rate cycle turns in a very rapid
Hmm.
way.
Of course. Well, thanks for your insights on that, Ingmar. I wanted to speak a little bit, sort of, about your private equity investment activity via Andromeda Capital Partners Swiss AG, where you're a founder. The company recently announced a $2 million investment in a trading fintech that's called Change. It operates a multi-asset investment app. And in the announcement announcing this investment, it was mentioned that Estonia, or you mentioned that Estonia to many is the startup capital of Europe. I wanted to ask you about Andromeda's investment strategy in general, and how Estonia continues to be actually an attractive geography for fintech and startups.
Sure, yeah. As you know, and as it's quite obvious as well, then Tickmill has been quite successful firm, and over the years the wealth of Tickmill shareholders has grown significantly, of course, and obviously one needs to invest these proceeds somewhere, and so one of these kind of avenues that I have is that I've set up a private equity firm called Andromeda Capital Partners, and with this entity, I'm investing into various other companies. One of which is Change. I invest in Estonia, which actually started in Estonia and has a big team in Estonia, but the license itself is out of Netherlands, so it's a Dutch regulated firm.
Interesting.
I've always liked this strategy that you need to sell when there's like ample liquidity, and you need to buy when there's like literally blood on the streets, which in the startup sector pretty much sums up the current situation, because the funding markets for many startups has really disappeared, and hence the valuations have dropped significantly. And when it comes to Change as well, so it's a very talented small team, very effective team. They have probably, I would say, one of the best licenses in Europe, which is the Dutch license. Very nice looking, customer friendly app, and the valuation simply was right, you know.
Hmm.
And so my strategy is pretty much investing into the space where I'm most knowledgeable about, which is the trading related investments, financial services related businesses. And when this crisis kind of emerged, that the rates started going higher, and the funding market kind of disappeared for many of the startups, then I started getting offers like on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. And yeah, it's there are definitely a lot of opportunities out there currently,
Hmm.
and planning to take full advantage of that. But when it comes to Estonia, yes, so many startups there. So TransferWise, which today is called Wise, it was launched out of Estonia. Taxify, which today is called Bolt, is out of Estonia. Skype was built in Estonia,
Mm-hmm.
and so a lot of tech savvy people there, and I think it's really like a melting pot for startups, and even if you take crypto startups, then like I was saying before, then at some stage there were around thousand or a few thousand regulated crypto firms in
Mm-hmm.
Estonia. So it's an interesting jurisdiction. Of course, it's a tiny country with a little bit over 1 million people living there, and you can imagine that when you have Microsoft's TransferWises or Wises, Bolts, everybody out there trying to capture the latest star developers and so forth, and the salaries go way above the salaries that you might expect in London or in some other financial centers around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So the employment market is completely distorted, I would say, and it's because of the size really,
Mm-hmm.
that the market is small and everybody's looking for the same talent, really.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
And I've also heard great things just about like Tallinn and other cities, the architecture, just the culture and the environment there seems to be very nice. I have to go one day. I will tell you that many years ago I was interviewing. This is something that I could probably publicly say now, but many years ago, I was confidentially interviewing for an executive position at a brokerage, which was based in Tallinn, and that was part of my consideration was this would actually be a very interesting change from living in the United States and in New York in a very, very, very big metropolitan area to moving to a smaller, quiet, more quaint type of city. That job prospect did not work out, so I didn't move to Estonia. But one day I definitely have to. I definitely have to visit. Inmar, I just had one more quick question before we wrap up, and this also has to do with Estonia. And I think it's a person. This last question is about sort of a personal passion of yours because it looks like you also work to promote Estonia's business cooperation with other countries. I think you helped launch the Estonian Chamber of Commerce in Switzerland recently. And I wanted to kind of ask you about this work that you do. And is it really, is it kind of this materialized out of a passion of yours because you are from Estonia, you spent time there, studied there, and spent part of your career there as well?
Yes, so it's a very interesting organization that we have launched, and so its goal is pretty much the same as many these chambers have. So we are there to promote Estonia as a country for business people and so forth, and at the same time we're also promoting Switzerland, and it's an interesting project in that sense that you get to meet a lot of business-minded people, entrepreneurs, startups, and you're trying to then facilitate them in terms of launching a business in Switzerland or in Estonia, and it's something. So when I was asked if I would be interested in joining, then I didn't think twice because I very much like Estonia and Estonians, and at the same time I very much like Switzerland and the Swiss people. So both are small countries in terms of the population, though Switzerland is much bigger. So Switzerland is 8 million people, but we culturally are quite similar. So very rational, very keen on keeping standards. I mean, Estonia. So as you know, Estonia's in the northern Europe, so you can't really relax there because when it's winter and you're relaxed, you haven't thought about saving for winter or putting some potatoes in the cellar, then you pretty much can end up dead. So you have to always think forward, plan. Yeah, so we are very similar, and I mean Estonia has. In terms of history, it has a big influence, so German influence. And even if you take Estonian language, then many words are coming directly from the
Hmm.
German
Hmm.
language. Chamber is just a very interesting project, and we see big future there. Trying to push it as much as we can with all of the members
Hmm.
there.
Great. It sounds like there's a lot of synergies, both culturally, like you said, historically, culturally, and also in a business sense as well, in terms of the rationale and how people think in the business world in both countries.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, culturally, we are very similar. So I remember when I relocated to Switzerland. So we took 3 trips. So we went to the so French-speaking Switzerland. So Geneva and some countries, some cities around it. Then we took another trip to Italian speaking Switzerland. And then the final trip was to the German speaking side of the Switzerland. And it really felt home because even architecturally speaking, the old town of Tallinn is very similar to the old town of Zurich, for example, because I mean architecture is quite alike.
Hmm.
So and it felt home and we all try to kind of follow the rules. So Estonia by nature is one of the fastest countries when it comes to implementing new EU regulations.
Hmm.
So we like to do things by the book, and Switzerland. Even though Switzerland is not in the European Union, then Swiss people by nature follow the rules
Hmm.
and respect others and try to stay neutral all the time and so forth. So yeah, it's quite nice.
Very, very interesting, Ingmar. Well, we wish you the best of luck in this initiative, and with the private equity investing and to Tickmill as well. I wanted to thank you for taking the time to speak with me and catch up. It's always great to, even if it's virtually, to talk to you. We wish you the best of luck on your trips to Dubai. Have a great summer. I hope to see you somewhere at a forex industry event soon.
Same here, and thank you, Nicola, for having me. It's always a pleasure to meet you, whether on this side of the Atlantic or the other side, or even virtually, like you said yourself. So thank you for having me, and it was really a pleasure on my side.
Thanks, Ingomar. Our pleasure as well. Have a great day.